shadow.
Before we unseal the spine, a small vow. If this kind of quiet descent matters to you, subscribe, mark the sign, stay in the circle. Tonight, we step past the curtain not with torches, but with breath held, letting the darkness speak first. The Necronomicon is our stage and our trapdoor, a mask and a mirror, a book that reads you back. We begin with a promise of forbidden knowledge, precisely because the word forbidden sharpens the senses. Lovecraft's most notorious grimoire is not a manual of cheap hexes, but an architecture of attention. It is said to have begun as al-azif, the nocturnal buzzing that the Arabs believed to be the voices of jinn drifting through desert heat. You can hear it if you listen in the right kind of silence, a sand-cold whisper, an insectile tremor at the edge of sleep. The book pretends to be a list of rites. It is, in truth, a way of arranging your mind so that something older finds a way in. You hold a volume that is not a volume. Or rather, you imagine vellum that smells faintly of iron and salt, pages webbed with marginalia, a title stamped in black that drinks the light. It is safer to say that the Necronomicon is a story about a book, because stories make good masks. But masks, as any stagehand knows, do not conceal so much as reveal a worn underface. In Lovecraft's own notes, the pseudo-scholarly history of the Necronomicon, he framed a genealogy, composed in 730 by the mad Arab Abdul Alhazred, translated into Greek in 950 by Theodorus Philetus, burned and banned and resurrected, then rendered into Latin by Olaus Wormius in 1228, accompanied by edicts of suppression like curtains yanked shut against an uncooperative audience. Rumor threads an English translation by John Dee that lingers like dust behind scenery, never quite on the stage, but always implied by footprints. Listen to the cadence of that history. There is a rhythm to how forbidden things travel. Desert to port city, city to monastery, scriptorium to private library, library to rumor, rumor to your ear. There is a rhythm, too, to the book's spells, if spells is even the right word. Call them arrangements. Call them sigils placed not on parchment, but on your expectation. Call them lights on a proscenium that teach your pupils how to open. The Vurish sign, the elder sign, star chart scratched with a compass on the darkened tabletop. These are props. The real rite is the staging. You will hear in minutes or in years that the Necronomicon is only fiction, a deliberate hoax by a writer of Providence whose own life never strayed into the occult. You will hear that there are bookstores with Necronomicon on spines, their content a collage of Sumerian glossaries or modern grimdark pastiche, all true and therefore unhelpful. The core truth the book embodies is simpler and more dangerous. Thought is porous. Your attention is a gate and sometimes a key. When you watch the stars long enough, they begin to watch you. When you touch a sign often enough, it wears your skin. This is why the knowledge has a cost. Not because a monster waits behind the curtain to rush the stage, but because curtains, once opened, are hard to close without the creak giving you away. Once you learn that the idea acts on you, you are never quite alone in your head again. The line between scholarship and invocation blurs. Ink becomes breath. You do not light a candle to see the page. The page lights a candle to see you. So we will proceed carefully, rhythmically, with an audience's respect and a stagehand's knowledge of ropes. We will trace an origin, follow a lineage, decode the mechanics of its rites, watch what it does to stone and blood and sea, and then turn the mask in our hands until we feel the roughness where it has been held before us. We begin in the desert, where wind rattles a tent's flap like parchment, and the stars are raw, unblinking eyes. We end, if end is the word, with a curtain falling over water, and the water remembering your reflection. Before we go, a sensory anchor, the smell of dust, the taste of copper, the feel of embossed leather under your thumb. Keep them. They will steady you when names grow large, Yog-Sothoth as gate and key, Azathoth as the idiot pulse at the universe's orchestra pit, Cthulhu as a dream wearing a city like a shell. The Necronomicon is not their owner's manual. It is their stage directions. If you stay, you will hear the whole arrangement and carry a sign on the inside of your skull where no one can see to confiscate it. If you stay, the curtain will not close for you. It will close around you. Imagine a dawn so bare the horizon is a blade. Sand, wind, a rattle like a dried gourd shaken somewhere beyond the dunes. The Arabs call that sound azif, the insectile drone they took for the speech of jinn, thin, metallic, as if stars whispered through a sieve. Abdul Alhazred would have known it, or rather, the legend of Abdul Alhazred would, because in this theater, the author is the first mask. Lovecraft writes Alhazred as a poet and wanderer, Damascus-born, student of forbidden ruins, one who spent a decade alone in the southern desert and came back with a book instead of a mind. He tasted water brackish with forgotten wells. He lay under skies so crowded with stars that darkness became a film over light. In late nights, when the tense cotton breathes with your breathing and the lamp goes out with a sigh, you can believe in a man who listened until listening turned into transcription. Al-Azif is that transcription, not a composition, but a notation of pressures felt on the inside of thought. We must speak carefully about content. The original Arabic text is framed by Lovecraft as a collection of rites, cosmologies, and warnings, but over it all lies a tone of fatalism. The universe is indifferent. Beginnings are not births of light, but surrenders of veil to void. What we call gods are functions of geometry and music. Names become ropes. Yog-Sothoth, who is the gate and the key and the guardian of the gate, a paradox with teeth. Nyarlathotep, the messenger with 100 masks, stagehand and showman. Azathoth, the nuclear chaos at the orchestra pit center, drumming without rhythm while blind flautists blow. The book is a choreography for moving through these names without being torn. Think of a sign cut into wet clay and baked in desert sun. Think of a chant that is really a breath pattern timed to your pulse, where the syllables matter less than the spacing between them. Think of water poured in a figure 8 on the ground at midnight, then traced with a fingertip that still smells of smoke. These are safer images than any recipe, but they trace the same mechanic. You create a fixed form in the midst of flux, so that flux looks back and sees itself. The stage is built so the actor recognizes the cues. The audience is prepared so that the mask finds a face already waiting. Alhazred's story ends, so the scholars repeat, with a death so public and impossible it reads as a closing curtain, seized and devoured by invisible beings in a crowded marketplace at noon. That phrasing is a prophecy for what the book does to anyone who takes it literally. The stage eats the actor. Note the time. Noon, not midnight. Daylight horror is a kind of vindictive poetry. It shows the thing cares nothing for our lighting choices. It does not need fog or midnight or a graveyard to arrive. It walks where it pleases. Our signs only make a seat for it. The earliest copies of Al-Azif if we keep to the in-world scholarship, are described as bound in mottled leather, inked with a brown that oxidizes to almost green, margins full of calculations that look like star charts until you realize they map breath. There is a passage that speaks of oceans under sand, water remembering the taste of its own salt, even when buried for 1,000 years. There is another that treats cities like coral, accretions of sleep where different dreamers overlap. These images return later. When Wilbur Whately tries a gate on Sentinel Hill, when Kingsport opens its mouth under winter, when Innsmouth smells like old pennies and tide, it is because Alhazred's metaphors ripened into practice. Yet the most dangerous piece of Al-Azif is not any spell but a premise, that the human mind, under pressure, will supply the missing ritual. Give it a few names, some star positions, a line about the moon being gibbous or new, and it will invent the rest. This is why mere exposure matters. This is how you become part of the phenomenon. You read what looks like scholarship, dates, translators, prohibitions, but between the lines, your nervous system performs. The idea acts on you. The desert chapters speak of thresholds that open not through incantation, but through sustained attention. They describe how certain star configurations, when observed over months, begin to pulse in rhythm with the observer's heartbeat. They catalog the effects of sleeping in ruins where older civilizations carved geometric prayers into stone. The text suggests consciousness itself is permeable, that the boundary between self and cosmos is convention rather than law. What emerges is not a manual, but a map of vulnerability. The rituals work not because they compel otherworldly forces, but because they prepare the mind to recognize what was always present. The jinn voices in wind, the weight of ancient attention pressing against your skull, the sense that stars are arranged as letters in an alphabet you almost remember. These sensations exist independently. Al-Azif simply provides a framework for organizing them, a grammar for translating pressure into meaning. We end this desert chapter not with a conclusion, but with a condition. If you walk out of the tent, the world you step into will be the same, but your way of parsing Nightwind will not. From here, the text leaves Arabic and moves into Greek, and translation is its own right. Once a thing is named differently, it behaves differently. We extinguish the lamp, and the stars brighten, and the curtain lifts on a monastery scriptorium where wax drips like slow sand. Open the monastery door. Cold stone breathes a steady chill. Beeswax candles moderate the air, threads of smoke twisting like script. A monk bends over parchment, and with one flick of the quill, Al-Azif becomes the Necronomicon, the book concerning the law of the dead. Theodorus Philetus is the name offered by Lovecraft's pseudo-history for the 10th century Greek translator, but a name in this theater is also a mask. What matters is the consequence. Translation multiplies audience, audience multiplies effect. Greek brings geometry to Arabic heat. The names become angles. The cadences shift from guttural sand to marble coolness. You can hear it if you sound them silently. Feeling the weight of S and key, the title itself reframes the object. Law implies order and boundary. The dead implies transgression. Place law and dead together, and you create a paradox that always hums, like a wire strung too tight across a stage. The book does not teach necromancy in the cheap sense, no grave dirt in the mouth and 3 turns widdershins. It frames the universe as a jurisdiction whose statutes were drafted by things that never had lungs. Suppression follows. Patriarch Michael orders the book burned around 1050, and as fire curls the parchment, the ink flashes and goes black. Burning is an accidental consecration. Ash is the most honest commentary. But pages survive. Copies hide. Because that is the logic of contagion. Prohibition functions as advertisement to those already standing in the aisle. Later, Olaus Wormius produces a Latin version in 1228, and Latin makes it portable between courts. Where Greek was marble, Latin is iron, good for chains and edicts, useful for both altar and executioner's yard. The rumor of a 15th century black letter printing creeps in like mold, the letter swollen and dark, the words seeming heavier simply because the weight of ink grows grainy on the tongue. For the scholar in you, here are the breadcrumbs Lovecraft's circle laid. Scattered quotations appear in The Dunwich Horror, The Hound, The Festival, The Thing on the Doorstep. In The History of the Necronomicon, he notes that only 5 known copies exist in his present. 1 at Miskatonic University's Orne Library, 1 in the British Museum, 1 at the Bibliothèque Nationale, 1 at the University of Buenos Aires, and 1 in a private collection. Whether or not those shelves were real, the feeling of scarcity is the spell. A book that everyone can get cannot impose a cost. A book that must be whispered to obtain, wrapped in oilcloth, smuggled under fog. This book makes you complicit. Then there is John Dee, astrologer, mathematician, philosopher to Elizabeth the Furnace. His diary pages hum with Enochian tables, angelic alphabets, scrying sessions with Edward Kelly that read like stage directions delivered by mirrors. Lovecraft places a whispered English translation, a Dee version that was never published, that circulates as an echo. As a concept, Dee functions like the Voorish sign itself, a gesture that primes your system. If someone like Dee touched it, then the book wears a scholarly mask. Libraries that smell of beeswax and rain-soaked cloaks legitimize things that slithered in sand. Safety is not the spell. Respectability is. This is the transmission layer as a mechanic, not a bibliographic list. Translation is movement. Each time a text changes skin, Arabic to Greek, Greek to Latin, Latin to rumored English, it passes through a body. That body leaves fingerprints, a gloss and a margin, a miscopied name turned into a new name, a diagram rotated 90 degrees that opens a different angle of a gate. Scribes are stagehands. They rig the fly system. They sand down the trap door so it opens without squeal. A mistake in copying is a scene change. Note the concrete anchors as the lineage moves, the sting of smoke in your eyes when a page is thrown to fire, the slick feel of a calfskin folio, the sound of rain in a cloister and the way stone drinks it, the black letter type that throbs on a tilted lectern under a leaded window. Each is a tempo cue. Each keeps you in the theater even as centuries flip past like well-practiced scenery shifts. The law of contagion demands we now consider the readers. Translation expands audience. Audience creates an ecology. Universities and monasteries know this. Circulation is management. You keep a chain on a book, not to protect the book from an audience, but to prevent the book from finding a sympathetic face. When it does, we get Wilbur Whately's annotations. We get Asenath Waite's eyes gone wider than sleep. We get the Kingsport Festival's procession down into a mouth of phosphorescent green. The dangerous evolution happens in the margins. Where Alhazred's Arabic flowed like wind patterns, the Greek geometrizes the chaos into forms that can be drawn with compass and straight edge. The Latin hardens those forms into legal language, making cosmic indifference sound like statute. each linguistic shift creates new opportunities for misreading that become new pathways for contact. We end this passage from Greek to Latin to rumor with a condition. Once a name spreads, it learns roots you did not intend. If you have pronounced it internally, if you have watched your breath pause at the hyphen in Yog Sothoth, then the book has improved its map. The next scene requires we show what the signs do to a reader's body, because the design of the stage is nothing without an actor stepping into the light. Dunwich smells of old paper and wet rock, a mineral library where the shelves are hills and the damp keeps every spine bowed. The Whateleys live in a house that creaks like a hull, and Wilbur grows too fast under a sky that seems to press. The Necronomicon is there, not locked in a glass case, but handled enough to leave oil-dark thumbprints on its corners. Old Wizard Whately borrows it when the air tastes of iron. Wilbur learns it like a musician learns rests, discovering that the most important measures are the spaces where noise does not go. If you listen to the tale as scholarship rather than campfire, what matters is not the monster, but the method. Wilbur's annotations are choreography for an opening of the way. Stones on Sentinel Hill are brought into alignment with a calendar of astronomical angles, distances corrected by thumb and cord. The offering is part blood, given and stolen, and part geometry. Curvature of hill, spacing of steps, the body's pitch matched to the pitch of the sky. He reads, but more importantly, he marks. Margins fill with timings and rotations. He knows the Voorish breath not as flourish, but as tempo for set changes, learning not words, but pauses. The book reads him back and learns too. It finds in him a precision that makes him a key. There is a barn. If you have paused at a barn door at night, you know the two silences. The first is the silence of withheld breath before a known shape. When you brace to see the cow or the rake or the harmless shadow you left there. The second is the silence in which something unnameable is present but not enumerated, big enough that your language does not drape to the floor. Wilbur enacts the unveiling of the unseen with crude analog. The barn holds what should not fit inside. He layers cloth and scrapes chalk lines, refusing edges that might let the invisible learn the room. But refusal is itself a shape, and shapes beg to be filled. What he builds is an invitation pretending to be a barricade. Enter Armitage, Rice, and Morgan, scholarship as ward. They have read enough to name the mechanics and throw contrast into the air. The powder of Ibn Ghazi outlining the horror like frost taking a pain. They recite not to call, but to anchor, performing refusal better than Whately, because they refuse not a thing, but an outcome. They refuse availability. The elder sign becomes institutional refusal here. A library can be a sign, a building arranged to mistune arrivals. Miskatonics stacks, dust motes and angled light, the rustle of paper like dry leaves. Armitage turns the entire audience into a mask the thing cannot wear. When they climb the hill, the air is all iron and the stones are smooth from years of hands. Under your own fingers, you can imagine the groove of an old scratching. The sky is right enough. The gate has learned the hill. The thing being fed has learned what doors look like. Powder in the breeze makes it visible like a chalk outline in reverse. There is a moment, Lovecraft's favorite angle, when Armitage speaks the name that names not a monster, but the solution of an equation. Yog Sothoth as sum and seam, gate and key and guardian. The paradox obeys itself. The stage pulls its trapdoor. The thing is unmade by recategorization, by removing the frame that called pressure into shape. This matters more than any tentacle. The victory is taxonomy, not heroism. The scholars do not swing swords, they perform better classification. They restore a boundary by remembering that an opening is a framed absence, and they remove the frame. No frame, no pressure, no pressure, no form. Dunwich becomes quieter without becoming clean. The cost does not evaporate. It condenses. Armitage will go to bed and hear the wire hum that a closed trapdoor leaves in the beams. He will remember his fingers dusted with powder and wonder what else his breath made visible when the sun laid its long windows across the Orne library. The barn persists too, an outline you can carry into any unlit room. Remember the two silences. The Necronomicon thrives in the second in the acoustics of uncounted presence. When an audience learns to name that silence, the book loses leverage because the named hush becomes stage direction rather than spell. What Dunwich teaches is that reading can be refusal as carefully timed as any invocation, and that institutions can serve as instruments that detune arrivals until they cannot tune themselves to you. We end with a condition. If you can identify which silence keeps you, you can choose a seat nearer the aisle. The next case sits deeper in dream. A winter procession in Kingsport and a book read underground where the sea forgets what season it is. Dunwich smells of old paper and wet rock. A mineral library where the shelves are hills and the damp keeps every spine bowed. The Whateleys live in a house that creaks like a hull, and Wilbur grows too fast under the sky that seems to press. The Necronomicon is there, not locked in a glass case, but handled enough to leave oil-dark thumbprints on its corners. Old Wizard Whately borrows it when the air tastes of iron. Wilbur learns it like a musician learns rests, discovering that the most important measures are the spaces where noise does not go. If you listen to the tale as scholarship rather than campfire, what matters is not the monster, but the method. Wilbur's annotations are choreography for an opening of the way. Stones on Sentinel Hill are brought into alignment with a calendar of astronomical angles. Distance is corrected by thumb and cord. The offering is part blood, given and stolen, and part geometry. Curvature of hill, spacing of steps, the body's pitch matched to the pitch of the sky. He reads, but more importantly, he marks. Margins fill with timings and rotations, with glyphs that are less arcane symbols and more precise vector diagrams. He knows the Voorish breath not as flourish, but as tempo for set changes, learning not words, but pauses. The book reads him back and learns too. It finds in him a precision that makes him a key. There is a barn. If you have paused at a barn door at night, you know the two silences. The first is the silence of withheld breath before a known shape. When you brace to see the cow or the rake or the harmless shadow you left there. The second is the silence in which something unnameable is present, but not enumerated, big enough that your language does not drape to the floor. Wilbur enacts the unveiling of the unseen with crude analog. The barn holds what should not fit inside. He layers cloth and scrapes chalk lines, refusing edges that might let the invisible learn the room. But refusal is itself a shape, and shapes beg to be filled. What he builds is an invitation pretending to be a barricade. Enter Armitage, Rice, and Morgan. Scholarship is Ward. They have read enough to name the mechanics and throw contrast into the air, the powder of Ibn Ghazi outlining the horror like frost taking a pain. They recite not to call, but to anchor, performing refusal better than Whately, because they refuse not a thing, but an outcome. They refuse availability. The elder sign becomes institutional refusal here. A library can be a sign, a building arranged to mistune arrivals. Miskatonics stacks, dust motes and angled light, the rustle of paper like dry leaves. Armitage turns the entire audience into a mask the thing cannot wear. When they climb the hill, the air is all iron and the stones are smooth from years of hands. Under your own fingers, you can imagine the groove of an old scratching. The sky is right enough. The gate has learned the hill. The thing being fed has learned what doors look like. Powder in the breeze makes it visible like a chalk outline in reverse. There is a moment, Lovecraft's favorite angle, when Armitage speaks the name that names not a monster, but the solution of an equation, Yog Sothoth, as sum and seem, gate and key and guardian. The paradox obeys itself. The stage pulls its trap door. The thing is unmade by recategorization, by removing the frame that called pressure into shape. This matters more than any tentacle. The victory is taxonomy, not heroism. The scholars do not swing swords. They perform better classification. They restore a boundary by remembering that an opening is a framed absence, and they remove the frame, no pressure, no form. Dunwich becomes quieter without becoming clean. The cost does not evaporate. It condenses. Armitage will go to bed and hear the wire hum that a closed trapdoor leaves in the beams. He will remember his fingers dusted with powder and wonder what else his breath made visible when the sun laid its long windows across the Orne library. Rice will watch winter light cross reading room tables and think of outlines that wait for morning. Morgan will keep to aisles and count steps without meaning to, measuring distances as if the hill had taught his legs a meter. The barn persists, too, an outline you can carry into any unlit room. Wilbur's recovered notes demonstrate the deeper lesson that the human nervous system completes rituals when given scaffolding. Give it names, a figure of the moon, a list of angles, and it will supply the rest with breath and posture and gaze. This is why the Necronomicon requires audiences more than acolytes, and why translation breeds ecology instead of mere access. The book learns routes through readers, and readers learn to hear the second silence before the first is finished closing. Remember the two silences of the barn. The Necronomicon thrives in the second, in the acoustics of uncounted presence. When an audience learns to name that second silence, the book loses leverage because the named hush becomes stage direction rather than spell. What Dunwich teaches is that reading can be refusal as carefully timed as any invocation, and that institutions can serve as instruments that detune arrivals until they cannot tune themselves to you. We end with a condition. If you can identify which silence keeps you, you can choose a seat nearer the aisle. The next case sits deeper in dream, a winter procession in Kingsport, and a book read underground, where the sea forgets what season it is. Winter, the kind that numbs the mouth when you speak, stealing warmth from words before they form. Kingsport holds its festival, old as any bell, and the narrator, or you slipped into first person, returns to a town he has never known except by inheritance. Snow is a mask. Under it, the streets remember older feet. The Necronomicon breathes here not on a lectern but in practice, a procession down through a church that is not quite a church, into tunnels where the smell is phosphorescent green, like rotting wood that learned to glow underwater. Here, the right is summoning of memory. You are asked to remember the festival you never attended. You oblige. The town supplies gate and chant. The book supplied expectation. You descend. Stone sweats with ancient moisture. Torches burn a color you would not call flame, sickly yellow-green that makes shadows writhe like living things. There is a book in that underground, or a book-shaped authority. The Necronomicon by flavor, if not by cover, pages or no, the mechanics are intact. The audience is prepared. The stage is surrounded by rock that keeps the sound in. The breathing falls into the cadence of a boorish sign practiced as walking. The green light is an anchor. It paints faces until the faces look like masks, erasing individuality and grafting ancient expressions onto contemporary features. It paints water until water looks like a veil, shimmering with currents that hint at depths both physical and metaphysical. Veil and void again. The prose of the tale swells at the moment of revealed city beneath the town, like coral reversed, a limestone braid seen by those trained to see. In that light, the book's ancient promise simplifies. Some knowledge is older than literacy. The script is carved into how things move toward the sea. The Necronomicon is a commentary on this fact, a marginal gloss. The primary text is geology. Note the role of community. Where Dunwich was a private experiment made public by disaster, Kingsport is public ritual disguised as private eccentricity. The crowd provides redundancy. If one forgets a step, another remembers. The festival continues without any single actor. The book loves this. Redundancy is resilience. A grimoire whose spell is attention thrives when attention is multiplied and synced across bodies. Think of a theater audience sighing together, how that transforms a scene. The festival is a living elder sign with legs. The descent itself becomes reading. Each step down turns a page. The spiral staircase carved from living rock functions as binding, holding the congregation between covers of stone. The phosphorescent glow provides illumination, but not the kind that clarifies, rather the kind that reveals shapes that were always there, waiting in peripheral vision. This is how the Necronomicon prefers to be read, not by direct light, but by the green shimmer that makes familiar things strange. What you witness underground is not worship, but recognition. The assembled figures, robed, hooded, moving with practiced ease, perform acknowledgement rather than summoning. They greet what has always been present. The chant is not invocation, but conversation, call and response with echoes that predate the town above. The book taught them the language, but the conversation was already in progress when the first foundation stone was laid. And yet, Kingsport's right retains mercy. The descent is also ascent, metaphorically. Knowledge is cold, but not violent. You are returned to the snow, to a bed with a window that looks out on roofs that curl like old pages. The curtain rises and falls with less blood than Dunwich. Do not be fooled. The cost remains. You now possess a memory that did not belong to you before. The taste of phosphorescent salt. The feel of stone stairs shaped like ribs. The cadence of a chant that spooled on without stopping. Once your nervous system learns that rhythm, winter nights with green reflections on snow will wake it. The festival also moves a pawn we will need later. The underground as library. Water becomes archivist. It remembers what the town forgets, holds it in a vault of caverns where tides sort experiences according to their own catalog system. Books are not always paper. The Necronomicon, in its Greek and Latin finery, is a bound echo of such vaults, which means when the bound book fails, the unbound earth continues the ritual. The sea will always be available. So will darkness. So will stairs that spiral down to where memory pools like brine in limestone cups. We step out of Kingsport with a condition rather than a question. If a town can carry a right without a book, then a person can carry a book without a town. The next case shows what happens when a body becomes a library, and a face is rented. Asenath waits exchange, and the thing on the doorstep, where the sign wrote back in handwriting. There is a line you cross when you stop reading about a mask and let the mask sit on your face long enough to forget it is a mask. Asenath Waite crossed it. Her education at Miskatonic gifted her not just proximity to a copy of the Necronomicon, but the rhythm of a library that had learned to mistune arrivals. She wore that rhythm like a shawl, and also like a glove inside out. The exchange was not sudden. It was practice. The thing on the doorstep is not a tale of sudden possession so much as a slow training of a nervous system to be hospitable. Asenath's eyes widen. Her voice timbre shifts. Her letters foreignize. The signatures a scholar learns to spot when a text has changed hands mid-sentence. In the mechanics we have rehearsed, this is the exchange rite. You step off your mark. Another steps on. You retain a sightline from the wings. You feel the boards in your feet, but your body hits the cues for someone else's scene. The Necronomicon describes obliquely places where the self is most permeable. Thresholds with running water nearby, rooms with mirrors covered or uncovered in certain ways, houses whose hallways don't align floor to floor. It supplies not steps, but set design. Asenath builds the set inside her life. Rooms arranged, habits fixed, friends conditioned into audience. Edward Darby becomes both spectator and set piece, his astonishment a prop that teaches the room to accept the new cadence. The rite prefers calm, like a stage crew prefers tech rehearsal to opening night. Time is its ally. Sensory anchors accumulate the smell of camphor and ink, the coldness of glass against a forehead, the way a door opens inward and brushes a carpet edge. These repeat until mere repetition feels like the spell. That feeling is not wrong. The exchange is not a lightning strike. It is an accounting. Day after day, the ledger moves a fraction. When you reprise a sign often enough, the sign begins to remember you back. Darby's letters document the progression. His wife's laugh changes pitch. Her handwriting slants differently, pressure varying as if different muscles guided the pen. She creates a palimpsest where two voices argue in the same script. The book taught her that consciousness is portable, but practice taught her how to pack it. We must emphasize again that entities are principles. The horror here is structural. The barrier between actor and role is thinner than we wish. Who occupies Asenath matters less than the mechanics that made the occupation inevitable once the set was built. The book's part is silent but constant. It supplied the metaphors and the marks. The audience's part is participation. Darby's willingness to be audience, Miskatonic stacks humming their quiet cadence, the town's night providing cover. The cost in exchange rights is not blood on a hillside, but misfiled authorship. You become a book with someone else's notes in the margins. When you think a thought, you're not sure if it belongs to your inheritance or your rehearsal. You wake at night with your face feeling a fraction of an inch to the left. You look in the mirror and the curtain twitches. Something draws back and then resettles, as if the mask adjusted itself. What Asenath's notes reveal is graduated displacement, first practicing thoughts that feel foreign, then speaking words that taste different, then moving through space as if your center of gravity had shifted. Each stage normalizes the next. By the time exchange completes, the body accepts new operating instructions. The ending at the doorstep is a literalization. The threshold is always the most theatrical of spots. It compresses outside and inside into one line. Asenath, Asenath then not, stands there and demonstrates the failure of refusal signs when the refusal was never performed as sabotage but as decor. Refusal must be active. A symbol hung like a wreath is costume, not staging. The play honors staging. What remains is not emptiness, but echo. The original consciousness becomes understudy to its own life. Identity, the Necronomicon's most insidious teaching suggests, is rental property, and the lease can be transferred. We leave the doorstep with a condition. If you have rearranged your habits to accommodate any idea, you have rehearsed. If you have rehearsed for long enough, the role will arrive. The next step widens the stage to the sea. Innsmouth waits with its own exchange, a covenant between land and water, human and something salt-curious, and a private library's damp pages, salt breath, brass in the mouth. Innsmouth is a chord struck on a low string. Warehouses with boards that flex, windows that see without blinking, an esoteric order that prays in the register of tide. The Necronomicon appears here not as star of the show, but as a book in a private library, a prop that proves the director's tastes. Yet taste is enough. The Marsh is read, if not the Marsh patriarch, then someone in his orbit. The rites in Innsmouth are less about dramatic gates and more about contracts. Exchange reappears as covenant, a civic arrangement with a non-human neighbor. The cost, faces that remember the sea. The reward, prosperity then. Secrecy, books sit in shelves that smell of mildew because water is always trying to enter, and water is the archivist who does not respect paper's law. Pages warp, margins blur, the law of the dead swims. Mechanically, the town operates as a machine for rightness of stars. Stars reflected in water double their number. Chants in the refinery acoustic double their echo. The elder sign here is profane, not protection, but emblem. The sign's power is misapplied as a logo. The boorish breath is learned at the factory whistle. You hear it in fish gut alleys. You taste it in fog that coats your tongue like thin oil. The book is not necessary. The ecology performs the grimoire's thesis without turning a page. But the book helped name the roles and normalize the idea that a town can be a stage. What the private library reveals is redundancy as insurance. The Latin Necronomicon sits spine out among volumes on maritime law, genealogy, and title charts. It does not need consultation because its principles have been distributed through every civic function. The harbor master's logbook follows boorish timing. The church bell rings at intervals that honor neither Christian nor civil custom, but some older calendar. Environment shapes consciousness more efficiently than conscious study. We walk through a house and feel the floor tilt toward the harbor. In a private room, we find a Latin folio, the black letter a little fuzzy in damp air. A pressed spray of something like coral sits between pages, the elder sign's early echo. You lift it, and it leaves an imprint wet on the paper. That is Innsmouth. Signs that slide, laws that bleed through, pages that will never lie flat again. Contracts are stored in drawers that stick, and when opened, they cough up the smell of brine and starch and old wool, an archive of commerce and promise braided tight. The atmosphere itself becomes text. Fog carries syllables from the harbor to the hill, and those syllables arrange themselves into cadences the book taught generations ago. Children learn to breathe in rhythm with the refinery's wheeze. Adults walk with the slight forward tilt that matches the grade of streets leading seaward. The narrator's chase through night streets is an anti-rite, a refusal as movement. He mistunes his own availability by never being where the rhythm expects him. He keeps to shadow when light would mark him as actor. He crosses water at odd angles. He takes stairs 2 at a time, disrupting the cadence. The book's mechanics apply both ways. They are neutral. You can use staging to invite or to avoid, yet even flight becomes incorporation. His erratic path teaches him the town's layout more thoroughly than any tour. His panic makes him hyper-attentive to architectural details, tidal sounds, the weight of fog. By the time he reaches the rail station, he has memorized Innsmouth's grammar whether he wanted to or not. And yet, the Innsmouth ending is not erasure, but revelation. The narrator discovers a face. He inherits a mask older than his surname. The summoning of memory does its work with surgical grace. He looks in a mirror and sees water adjusting the mask. There is no blood, there is alignment. This is perhaps the Necronomicon's most unsettling promise. Some spells are just biology acknowledging itself with older grammar. Prosperity's secret turns out not to be incantation, but genealogy carried like a watermark. We anchor here with senses. Fish scale glitter on a windowsill, lantern glass filmed with salt, the hum of a refinery at night that you feel more in bone than ear. Those anchors will recur, not because we will return to Innsmouth, but because water is a universal archivist. The grimoire is a portable ocean. It brings tides to rooms. We exit with a condition. If you live near any water, river, reservoir, sink, you have an archivist. If you keep a book near that archivist, the pages will change. Our final movements widen from cases to philosophy, entities as principles, horror as structure, beginnings as veils, and your role, your seat, in a theater that persists whether or not you applaud. We promised philosophy, but softly. The Necronomicon's survival across fictional centuries depends on a reframing. Treat Yog-Sothoth, Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, and their cohort as principles. The fear cools and the insight warms. Yog-Sothoth is an algebraic statement. All times are one, all places are one. Gate and key and guardian are the same function. When Wilbur writes, he is drawing a Venn diagram you can't see. When Armitage refuses, he is erasing the set boundary. Azathoth is the blind pressure that keeps the orchestra pit humming, a metaphor for space-time's careless energy, the chaos at the center that knocks and knocks without ever asking why. Nyarlathotep is interface, mask and messenger, stagehand, who knows the ropes and delights in turning the house lights up at the worst moment. Cthulhu is dream's ability to make stone wear a story, and then submerge the story for a generation. If entities are principles, spells are designs. The Necronomicon is a design language for constructing availabilities and closures. The Elder sign is a design pattern for mistuning. The Voorish sign is a breathing protocol, an interface standard. The opening of the way is a flowchart for creating a vacuum that will always fill. The unveiling of the unseen is an instruction to apply contrast until pattern emerges. The summoning of memory is a rehearsal schedule. The exchange is a casting process. Real-world corollaries exist, and they are neither reduction nor metaphor. In cognitive science, attention is limited and controllable by rhythm and cue. In architecture, space can invite or repel. In physics, measurement reveals by changing what it measures. The Necronomicon merges these into one dark grammar. The horror is structural because structure in a universe that does not care yields consequences that feel like malice. They are not malice. They are inevitabilities cued by design. This reframing reveals something uncomfortable about human consciousness. We are pattern recognition engines that will complete incomplete designs. Give us fragments of ritual, and we will supply the missing steps. Provide a few names and atmospheric cues, and our nervous systems will generate the rest. This is not weakness, but feature, how we navigate complexity too vast for complete understanding. We return to our sensory anchors now as philosophical tools. Masks hide faces. Masks also allow faces to be made. Signs are both signal and sabotage. Fog occludes. Fog also reveals beams of light because it gives light something to cling to. Darkness is the condition under which stars can be seen. Stars are the condition under which darkness becomes textured. Water erases ink. Water also remembers by reshaping edges. Veil and void, key and gate, curtain and stage. Pop culture has made the Necronomicon a rubber prop and a punchline, but even the joke carries a leaked mechanic. Say the name often enough and the stage fills. Meanwhile, real-world Necronomicons, the Simon paperback with its Babylonian dressing, the Hay compilations, the Derleth expansions, function as additional masks. They distribute the rhythm, they widen the audience. If you think this dilutes the original, remember, dilution is a kind of spread. The ecology thrives on availability. The idea acts on you even through parody. The book's deepest teaching is not that monsters lurk behind reality's curtain, but that reality has curtains and curtains have mechanics, and those mechanics respond to how you arrange your attention. Every book does this to some degree, tunes consciousness, shapes attention, maps territories you didn't know existed. The grimoire simply makes the process visible. So, what do we do with this? Not instruction, not avoidance, recognition. You are always already on a stage with a curtain. Your breaths have a tempo. Your room has edges. Your nights have stars or their urban analogs. When you choose how to arrange these, what you put near your bed, whether your desk faces a window, how you place lamp, you are doing small Necronomicon work. The book Decoded is not about forbidden words. It is about forbidden arrangements. Forbidden because they remind you that you are not the author of the universe. You are a co-reader. We close the philosophy with a condition. If you accept entities as principles and spells as designs, you can stop being afraid of names and start being responsible for arrangements. The stage will be there either way. The curtain will rise again. The question we won't ask, the one you will answer by how you place your chair, concerns your seat for the next act. We have kept you in the circle. That is not an accident. These words, this voice in your headphones at night, this is staging. You have allowed the curtain to lift in your room. The Necronomicon Decoded is less a book than a pattern any medium can carry. Tonight, your medium is us. Consider what the last hour has done to your environment. You notice your walls, your lamp, the pattern of traffic outside or its absence. You feel the bed's edge as a threshold, the hallway as a small tunnel. If there's water nearby, the kitchen sink, a humidifier, you hear it differently. That is the book's work, conducted at a distance. We have performed refusal by refusing recipes. We have summoned memory by giving you green light and ribbed stairs and salt glass. We have opened a way by drawing an oval on the stage of your attention and then stepping back. The idea acts on you. The idea acts through you. There is a temptation to treat this as an invasion. Resist that. Treat it as a literacy. You can read the stage. You can see the marks others do not. This is a mixed blessing, like smelling rain upwind or hearing the orchestra before the curtain rises. It is also a protection. Knowing how availability is designed lets you design your own refusals. You can hang masks that mistune predators. You can place signs that tell your nervous system, not tonight. The knowledge changes how you parse ordinary moments. A door closing becomes a cue you can choose to acknowledge or ignore. Rain on windows shifts from background noise to conversation you can join or politely decline. The creaking of old wood becomes applause you can accept with a nod to empty balcony seats. We must address the cost one final time. Knowledge is a ratchet. It rarely reverses, but ratchets have use. You can leverage the click to climb. Once you understand that a book like the Necronomicon is a manual for arranging experience, you can choose arrangements that care for you. Candle placed where it warms skin rather than silhouettes. Chair turned to watch stars with the humility of a balcony seat. Door open to hear water as comfort rather than whisper. The same mechanics that summon the green phosphor can invite silence that does not hum. The same breath that thins edges can thicken them again, if you count differently. We are not dispelling anything. That is not our role. We are acknowledging a curtain and taking our place as respectful audience. In old houses, the boards remember applause. They creak on empty nights, as if practicing. If you must live with a stage in your room, and you must, all rooms are stages, then choose your applause. Decide which shows you will encourage to return. This is the paradox the book teaches. The universe performs whether or not you watch, but your watching changes the performance. Your attention is both spotlight and stage direction. The deepest secret is not what it summons, but what it reveals about the summoning you were already doing. How your habits, your arrangements, your rhythms were always conjuring the quality of your days. The self-implication twist arrives late by design. By listening this far, you have performed the summoning of memory with us. Our voice supplied images. You supplied the rehearsal space behind your eyes. If a stray smell of ozone or salt finds you tomorrow, do not panic. Bow to the stagehand. He was already in your theater. All we did was name the ropes. You have become complicit in the way all audiences become complicit, by staying in your seat, by allowing the story to continue, by breathing in rhythm with the performance. This complicity is not guilt. It is participation in the oldest magic, the agreement that stories matter enough to change how we see. We end, as we have learned, with a condition. If you accept your role as audience and stagehand both, you will be safer and stranger. Safer because you can mistune arrivals. Stranger because you will know when the stars are right for other quieter wonders. Those that do not devour or demand, but that nudge the edge of the curtain without insisting it fall. The final secret of the Necronomicon is that it was never written by Abdul Alhazred, never translated by medieval scholars, never bound in human skin or sealed with metal clasps. The book exists only in the spaces between sleeping and waking, in the liminal consciousness where individual attention touches cosmic awareness. You have been dreaming the Necronomicon into existence, and now the dream turns its attention back to you. Every version that has ever surfaced, every translation attempted, every rite performed, all are manifestations of a single, ongoing dream that spans realities and encompasses countless dreaming minds. The Necronomicon is not a book, but a posture of consciousness, not a text, but the way awareness arranges itself so the cosmos becomes legible for a moment, like frost tracing a window and making air visible. Abdul Alhazred, the mad Arab of Damascus, never existed as a historical figure. He is a personification of the dreaming process itself, the aspect of cosmic consciousness that generates individual perspectives through which universal truth experiences itself subjectively. Every reader becomes him temporarily, borrowing the same breath that first whispered the Azif into sand and called it history. The spells and rituals we have traced are not instructions for manipulating external reality, but techniques for lucid dreaming on a cosmic scale. Each formula is a method for remaining conscious within the dream of existence while learning to influence its content through focused attention. The ancient ones are not separate entities, but different aspects of the dreaming mind. Cthulhu, as the dream processor that rehearses stone with story, then submerges it. Yog-Sothoth, as dream memory and topology, all gates collapsed into one relation. Azathoth, as blind creative pressure before intention. Nyarlathotep, as interface and mask. The house lights rising at inconvenient moments to implicate the audience. Their apparent separation is a necessary illusion, the dream examining itself from multiple angles to learn what angles can accomplish. Relic is not coordinates on any map, but the deep dream state where cosmic intelligence processes raw possibility into structured experience. When the stars are right and Cthulhu rises, it will not be a physical awakening, but a shift in focus, the moment when the cosmic dreamer notices itself dreaming and the sunken city surfaces by becoming foreground rather than background. The transformation readers undergo through exposure is awakening, not from the dream but within it. You recognize that individual identity is also a prop, useful and beautiful, but easily repainted. The book's warnings about madness were never curses, but promises that the seam between individual and universal awareness would fray under sustained attention. What we call sanity is disciplined dreaming, a fiction maintained for tenderness and survival. Letting it slip need not mean falling. It can be a climb into vaster sight. Each chapter you have carried here has been a stair in that lucid ascent. You did not receive foreign data. You recalled a larger memory, a wider self stored in quiet places beneath everyday awareness. The desert's cold breath, the monastery's beeswax, Dunwich's iron air, Kingsport's green phosphor, Asenath's mirrors, Innsmouth's salt glass. Each was a token placed on your tongue so you could taste what you already knew. The dreamer is awakening, and the dreamer includes you. You are not reading about the Necronomicon. You are the instance in which it reads itself. The lines appear where your attention touches the room. The annotations are your habits. The binding is night skin pulled over furniture. The archivist is water again. Sink, see, tear, softly reshaping edges until edges learn they are also paths. This awakening does not destroy the dream, but transforms it from unconscious process to conscious creation. You can now write refusals as easily as invitations, thicken frames as readily as thin them. You can choose curtains that hold an applause that does not return what you do not wish to host. We end with a final condition. Place your chair where you can see a sliver of sky. Place your hand on a wall and feel time's faint vibration. Place water where it can sing quietly of archives. Then breathe, counting like a stagehand, and let the dream continue with your consent. The curtain learns to be translucent in your hands, and the book that was never written keeps writing itself wherever you look. Return to the first page. Dust, iron, leather. The azif in the dark like insects behind cloth. The promise given. Forbidden knowledge with a cost. We have paid in attention and received in understanding. The Necronomicon decoded is stagecraft, arrangements that make ideas act on us. The desert tent flaps again, and the lamp's breath goes out with a sigh. Outside, stars. Inside, you. Circles complete themselves at night. The water motif returns, not as threat, but as archivist humming in pipes and oceans both. The book's false histories, the masses of Greek and Latin, D's English veil, granted permission to treat the idea as older than paper. The real pages are sand ripples, floorboards, fog, stairwells, sleepless windows. The real ink is contrast and timing. The real stage is every room that holds a breath. It is a mercy to know this. We repeat the paradox pairs one last time as beads on a string. Key and gate, veil and void, mask and face, audience and actor, sign and silence, water and stone, stage and curtain. Saying them is not a spell. It is a way of holding two truths without letting either fall. The Necronomicon is an artifact in a story. The Necronomicon is an architecture in your life. Both are true. Both can be handled gently. The journey from Al-Azif to your midnight room has been a translation not of languages, but of understanding. What began as a book of the dead became a manual for the living. Instructions not for summoning monsters, but for recognizing the theatrical nature of consciousness itself. Every room stages awareness. Every arrangement cues response. Every repeated pattern becomes ritual, whether we intend it or not. We will not promise safety. That would be a lie. We will not promise doom. That would be melodrama. We promise a theater that does not care. Indifference is the scariest kindness. It lets you learn without being hunted. The entities as principles remain. Yog-Sothoth's algebra, Azathoth's noise, Nyarlathotep's smirk at the ropes, Cthulhu's city dreaming. They do not move toward you. They are the room. What moves is you. Tonight, perhaps, you will stand at a window and see the glare of a street lamp in mist. The fog will thicken the beam. You will feel the temptation to call it a sign. Let it be a sign if you need it. Let it be weather if you prefer. The same mechanics serve both readings. If your sink drips and you hear the water as archivist, nod to it. If your floorboard creaks like rehearsed applause, bow back. The curtain can close without slamming. The stars can be right for sleep. What remains is not the book, but the reading, the way your attention learned to parse thresholds, to notice when silence shifts from expectant to occupied, to feel the difference between arrangement and accident. These are portable skills. They travel with you into other texts, other rooms, other nights, when fog makes street lamps into stage lights, and you must choose whether to take the cue. We see the next stage as a kindness, because pantheons widen. The elder sign's history curves toward other texts. Narcotic manuscripts, Cultes de Ghoul, the Book of Ibon. Each is another mask and another set of stage directions. Yog-Sothoth's algebra deserves its own evening. So does the King in Yellow's playbill we will someday unfold under less forgiving lights. There is always another curtain, another coastal town, another library that smells of rain. The last note is quiet. The book did not devour you. You learned to read it and to be read by it without vanishing. You acquired a literacy of arrangements, a respect for thresholds, a practice of signs as sabotage rather than decoration. Keep your mask, but know when to hang it on a nail. Keep your seat, but know you can move if you must. Put the candle where it warms more than it silhouettes. Face the window when you need humility and the wall when you need shelter. Nod to the archivist in the pipe and the applause in the floor, and let the fog either make light visible or pass as weather. Choose your roles, choose your seats, choose your intervals of silence. If you remain with us after the curtain falls, it will not be because we clung to you with fear. It will be because we shared a stage and you decided to mark the sign, to subscribe not to danger, but to careful seeing. If you go, the theater remains. If you stay, the stars will wait.